I'm going to get right into introducing us to our speaker. I want to spend plenty of time with him. So, this is one of the easiest people that I have ever introduced here at Eat, Pray, Learn for two reasons. One, because he's my friend, but I've introduced my friends before. The second is that he's one of the only people I know who's had the same job since he was 18 years old. Although Doug Davis, are you here? Doug Davis has also had the same job since he was 18 years old. There's two of you, you can get together afterwards and talk about it. So Eric has also loves Harvard University. Do you have 3 degrees from Harvard? Yes. So Eric has 3 degrees from Harvard. There is no other school for Eric, okay? So the third one was free, right? Are you still paying for the rest of them? Yeah. Okay, so when he was an undergrad at Harvard, when he was 18 years old, he started this organization called Peace First, which he's going to tell you all about tonight, so I won't. But he started it at 18, and then he flirted with, well, actually, he didn't flirt with your second degree was to help Peace First too, right? Yes. And then he got his master's of divinity at Harvard as well, and studied to be a minister, and now he is the Reverend Eric Dawson. And that entire time, he has been at Peace First as the executive director. And I know him because he was the intern minister at First Parish in Milton, where I was the director of religious education, so we served together for 2 years at church. And now Eric serves the world. His ministry is quite literally the world. And he's touched the lives of so many, especially young people, and also my life. So I'm so delighted to have him here at First Church in Sterling. Welcome, Eric.
It's me again. So yeah, 26 and a half years in the same job, which is either a deep personal commitment or lack of professional ambition. And just Mark and Sarah, thank you so much for the worship. And I don't know if anyone else feels so, but I would just love Sarah to record every audiobook you ever listen to. I'm just saying. In theory, I'm here because I wrote a book, and I bought copies of the book in case people want to buy them. And I will confess something that my publisher has asked me not to share with people as I talk about my book. I had no interest in writing a book. Like, zero. And people, when you run an organization that's a certain size for a certain amount of time, they say you need to write a book, right? And it's always the same book. It's like, here's my story, here's this great problem, here's this great organization I found and everything was awesome, and then it got really bad, and then it was awesome again, and here are my 5 policy recommendations. And I realized I had no interest in reading that book, let alone writing that book. And then a dear friend of mine suggested she said, write the book that you would want to read. Write the book that you would want to read. And I thought of myself when I was a young person. And I'll be honest with you, I was a really pissy kid. I think that's a therapeutic technical name of my condition. I was an angry young person, and in confidence, I was an angry young person because I experienced violence as a kid. And my sense with young people who experience violence in their lives, and maybe this is true for some of us, or people that you know, is we tend to do one of 3 things. We hurt other people because we're seeking some form of justice, as twisted as that might sound. We hurt ourselves through poor decision-making, substance abuse, you name it. And some of us become lucky, we become organizers, right? We externalize our anger. So that was me. I was that 14-year-old organizer. I went to a huge public high school in the Midwest, and it was the start of the inclusion movement in schools, which meant that kids with disabilities who'd been kept in substantially separate classrooms were now being invited into regular education classrooms. And like what often happens when there are changes in education, no one's prepared for it. And those students had the crappy time, either physically or emotionally. And so I began organizing to change the culture of my high school. Not because the principal said, we're a zero-tolerance school, we don't do this, but students to students deciding we were going to be different. And for me, it was the first time I got to feel powerful in a way that wasn't about beating the crap out of someone or carrying a weapon, but feeling like I could actually change time and space. And what's interesting is this is not a unique feeling. Like, I was not a special young person, right? So many young people feel this. There are 1.6 billion young people on the planet, give or take, and I'm thinking about 13 to 25-year-olds, which is the age that we focus on in our work. And what's fascinating is so many of them have these feelings. I imagine many people in this room have these feelings of feeling angry and then helpless in our anger. And so, really why I'm here is not to sell books, again, I'm telling my publisher, but because I am deeply worried about our country and the world, and our ability to come together to solve problems, and our ability to support young people in their quest for justice in ways that are healthy and supported. I talk a lot to young people about violence, and I was speaking to a group of about 120 sophomores, and I was invited to come and talk about violence, and this was in Chicago, and things young people could do to make their communities better. And so I asked these young people, how many of you have experienced violence in your lives? Every single hand that went up. I imagine if I asked this question in this room, a lot of hands would go up. Right? Every single young person in that room had experienced violence in some form or another. So then I said, okay, how many of you have a solution to the problem of violence in your community? 80, 90% of the hands went up in the air. Right? These young people had ideas. They had solutions. They had things they wanted to do to improve their community. So I said, okay, how many of you have had an adult ask you for your solution to the problem of violence in your community? Maybe 15% of the hands stayed in the air. So I said, okay, how many of you have had an adult offer to put resources behind your idea? Time, money, mentorship, anything. Every single hand that one went down. Do you see the problem? I mean, really, do you see the problem?
Yes.
1.6 billion young people on this planet who want to make the world a better place. And yet our narratives around young people they are victims that we need to protect, they are perpetrators that we need to lock up. Right? We incarcerate young people, we medicate young people, we turn our schools into prisons. My daughter's a high school junior, small school in Boston, 260 students. She walks through a metal detector to learn. Or young people are the future. Right? We go into our schools and in our churches and we tell young people, y'all are going to be great artists, leaders, writers, whatever, someday, which tells young people what? Not now. Wait your turn. Right? Those are the messages and the narratives that we give to young people. And then when we do invite them in, if we're honest with ourselves, what we invite them to do is fairly transactional. Right? We have what I like to call the youth service industrial complex. Right? Which is, how many cookies did you make? How many hours did you volunteer? How much money did you raise? All good things. But that's not impact. And almost all those programs are adult-run, adult-created, run around adult timelines. And they're all about what you do, but do not speak to what young people care most about, which is who you are. Because that's what we ask young people, right? What do you want to do when you grow up? Not who do you want to be. That's what you do at parties. What do you do? What do you do? Not what's bringing you joy. And so the problem with our models and what we invite young people into is they tend to be transactional, they tend to be adult-focused, and they tend to be adult-created. And our ability to solve problems, our ability to draw our areas of concern bigger and bigger, feels particularly afraid right now. And so when we talk about peacemaking, what we're really talking about is how we want to support young people to be problem solvers. And it's around 3 values. The first is compassion. The second is courage. And the third is collaboration. I want to talk about these for just a second. Compassion, right? The ability to see someone else's needs as our own, right? The ability to cross lines of difference. Jessica, a young woman I work with, was adopted when she was 7 years old from an orphanage in China. So imagine not just coming to a new family, but new language, new country. And she had this moment as she was flying over the United States where her flight attendant gave her a teddy bear to hold on to. She's 10 years old, and her insight is that in moments of crisis, of hurt, what we need are small acts of compassion, of connection, of someone saying, I see you. So this 10-year-old convinced every single first responder in San Diego County where she lived, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, to carry bags of teddy bears in their vehicles. So something bad goes down, and they show up, the very first thing they would do, there was a kid there, was give that kid a teddy bear to hold on to. It was fascinating researching this, because I talked to her, I talked to her family, but I talked to firefighters, I talked to 3 firefighters, big burly dudes, and they're telling me the story about what it's like to show up someplace, give a kid a teddy bear, and they're crying, like sobbing. And I remember pausing, asking what the tears were about, and what they said is, Eric, this was the first time we understood our job as caregivers. And it changed how I understand my job. Right? Compassion. The second value is courage. Right? This is about taking risks. It's about standing up for someone else or standing up for an idea. And this, I think, is one of the most complicated parts of peacemaking. Any parents or grandparents or educators or aunties, uncles in here, just show hands. 1 or 2. So this is the most terrifying part of supporting young people leading change, because it involves risk. Because we are terrified of our kids getting hurt. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. I remember when my son started walking for the first time. He's a little bit daredevil. Right? And the first thing he did when he started walking is he did what? He fell down. Right? And for that moment I said, okay, I'm just going to shut this down and carry this little dude until he's 30. He never would have had that opportunity to grow, to learn, to make mistakes. But we do that as adults. Because we ultimately are not worried about our kids' hearts breaking, we're worried about our own. Right? We're trying to protect our own heartbreak of seeing our little ones suffer in any way. Courage. Wei Chen was 15 years old when he moved to South Philadelphia to attend a large public school there. Second week of school, he got sucker punched in the back of the head while he was at his locker. Bleeding, he walked to the school security office, and they took out a binder of black and white photos, opened it up, and said, okay, who hit you? He's like, I don't know. Sorry, we can't help you. This young man did not eat lunch for a year and a half because he was too terrified to go in the cafeteria, and they did not allow students to bring food in. So he hung out in the bathroom. There was one day where 26 students at a school were assaulted. 26 students were assaulted at school, in classrooms. 17 of them had to go to the hospital to seek medical attention. So this young man did not speak much English, against the wishes of his family, decided to organize an 8-day boycott of his high school. And what he said is, we are not going to participate in a system that does not see us as human. First day was just him with the microphone. Second day, it was other Chinese students and Pan-Asian students and a multiracial group, until there were hundreds of people participating in this boycott. He filed a Justice Department lawsuit, which he won. One of the first of its kind, brought by young people, that said we had a right to be safe inside our school building. Got sensitivity training for all the teachers, got a new principal for the school. But imagine that moment where everyone else is saying, you're a senior. You have 6 more months. Just wait it out. Because his insight was, 50 years ago, it was white students being at black students. Now it's black students being at Asian students. And that cycle's going to continue. And actually, the kids who are beating the crap out of me and my friends, it's not their fault. It's a school culture that condones that kind of behavior. Right? That level of courage, that level of risk. Babatunde was 17 years old when he was driving home from an internship. He happened to have his hand out the window, and he got pulled over by the police on suspicion of having drugs. The police said that because his hand was out the window, that meant that he was throwing drugs out the window, so he wouldn't get arrested. Had his hands cuffed, thrown to the ground, his car whipped up, and then released with a threat. Next time we see you in this neighborhood, we're going to beat the bleep out of you. It was Babatunde's first experience like that with law enforcement, but it was not a unique experience for his community. And so he decided to make a movie about it. What he did is he interviewed young people of color about their experiences with the police. But he didn't stop there. He then went and interviewed police officers. And he asked them, what goes through your mind in those moments? What's it like to walk up to a group of young people you don't know? Or a car that's dark? What do you worry about? What keeps you up at night? Talk about compassion. His insight was that police officers and young people are terrified of each other because they don't know each other. So this young man, 17 years old, went on to train 2/3 of the Baltimore police force on how to work with young people. And he did this by inviting young people of color and police officers to act out high-pressure scenarios by playing one another. That sense of empathy. Oh, that's what it feels like. And what's interesting about Babatunde, so I wrote his story in my book, and I let all the young people read the story. He's like, no, you make this sound too easy, Eric. Because if he was here, he said, I still don't like the police. I still don't feel safe. But what I've come to understand is it's not the individual police officers, it's the system within which we're all operating that's broken. And the courage that it took to be a young man of color in Baltimore and go to police precincts every week. I mean, certainly to show up to a group of officers. And let's be honest, any of us who sat through professional development at the end of a long day, whether we're teachers or police officers or ministers, that's often the last place we want to be, let alone hearing from a 17-year-old kid. To do that again and again and again takes courage. But to be in a neighborhood where working with the police is seen as a betrayal, to risk the loss of his friends, that's courage. And the reason I want to stay on this for a second, I want to do a little truth-telling here, if you don't mind, myself included, in this circle. For so many of us, when we enter a situation, the first thing we ask is, what do I get out of it? Most of us, I think most people in the room, move to a place of what can I give? What can I contribute? But rarely do we move to that next stage of what am I willing to give up? What am I willing to sacrifice for the greater good? And that is something I worry about for our country right now, that sense of shared sacrifice for the common good. Anyone here go to amusement parks? Disney World? Anyone here from Ohio? It's probably a lot of Ohio people. Cedar Point is the most amazing amusement park in the world. I took my son there. And as you know, because you probably go to these places, they have these fast passes you can buy. And I refused to let my son get a fast pass. One is I want some of the money because I'm cheap. But there's just something about that if you have enough money, you can just bypass the line. California has private roads, right? We've got private schools, right? We can sort of withdraw ourselves from the common good because it's uncomfortable. And so a big part of courage is really trying to figure out what are you willing to give up for that greater good, and what are the risks you're willing to take. We have a prize that we give out. Imagine a Nobel Peace Prize for young people. And I'll be honest, I can fill those slots with incredible kids who raise $1 million for orphans in Somalia, or feed 1,000 hungry kids in South Florida. Great work. But let's be honest. If your father's a billionaire, and you do a lemonade stand where 10 of his friends come and buy a glass of lemonade for $100,000, how are you different? What risks did you take? Courage. The third piece is around collaborative leadership, right? So we tend to focus on individuals, right? It's the minister, it's the CEO. We think about the civil rights movement. We often talk about Selma or Dr. King, these moments in leaders. Okay, but the civil rights movement was hundreds of thousands of people, mostly young people and women, by the way, sitting in church halls and church pews and kitchen tables and counters, deciding they were going to be different. That is how change happens. And so collaborative leadership is about how do we help young people build networks. I don't care how awesome you are. I want to know how you're helping other people be awesome. Jeremiah was a high school sophomore in Iowa City, Iowa. And what he noticed is students in the school were saying horrible things about one another online that they would never say to each other face to face. I'm sure no one has any idea what I'm talking about. Cyberbullying. And what was interesting, it was finding its way into the school. Fights, relationships breaking up. And his insight was, how do we use these same tools that are destroying relationships to build them up? And he stumbled upon this idea of compliments. What would it look like to create a Twitter handle that just pumped out compliments all day long in his school? And what he realized is that a compliment needed to do two things. One is it needed to be genuine, and the second is it needed to be specific. And in a school of 2,000 kids, where he knew about 200, he could not have genuine, specific compliments for every student. So he went out and recruited students from other social groups. And they had to audition. And their audition was they had to identify a student they did not like at the school and tweet out something nice about that person. If they couldn't do it, no worries. But if they could, he wanted them to be part of his team. So he built a team of 10 young people. It was all anonymous. And all they did was pump out compliments all day long. Go girls cross country team, you got this. Robin, you seem sad after math class. I hope your day gets better. What's fascinating about the story is incidences of violence, suspension rates, disruption dropped by about 74% after 3 months. And it wasn't because they passed a new regulation or they were suspending kids left to right, which is what we do. Right? We criminalize behavior in schools. But it was student to student saying we're going to be different. And he was clear that he could not do that work himself. Like, even if he worked around the clock. Think about how much more powerful his work was by building that community to pump those compliments out. Right, so think about that. Compassion, courage, collaborative leadership. The other thing that I worry about, besides our models of how we engage with young people in our narratives, is who gets to participate. One of the things that I'm noticing more and more in the social change space, social entrepreneurship, volunteer space, is it's reproducing the same inequality that exists everywhere else. Right? If you don't have money to do a cool internship in Guatemala to help people, or if you don't have family money or school resources, it is really hard to get started. Right? I started my organization as an 18-year-old, but I was an 18-year-old Harvard freshman. So I sent letters to the Boston Public Schools, let me come and teach peacemaking to your students. It was on Harvard stationery. Right? It wasn't Roxbury Community College, where a lot of my friends went. I was just a kid from my neighborhood. Right? I had that validation and platform and power behind me. And so how do we build a space that's big enough for all young people who want to change the world to feel like they can? I want to say just one thing about young people. So the age group that we're focused on is called Generation Z, or Centennials. So sorry millennials, your time is up. Thanks for playing. We're now on Centennial. Young people born after 1996, 1998. The data on them is fascinating. So anyone who's worried about the future, let me tell you about this group of young people who are coming up. First of all, they want unmediated experiences. They want to build, they want to create, they're entrepreneurial. They don't want to be in classrooms, they want to be in Khan Academy. Right? They want to build, they want to create. The second is they build community digitally in powerful ways. My oldest daughter, who's 16, was sitting on the couch. I said, "Sweetie, why don't you call one of your friends and say hello?" "Daddy, we do not call our friends, we text our friends." I remember 30 years ago, sitting on the couch and my mom saying, "Sweetie, why don't you go out and play with your friends?" And I was like, "Mother, we don't go out, we call our friends." Right? Each generation finds different ways of building the communities, and what's powerful about this generation is digital communities let young people connect across lines of difference and distance in ways that are incredibly powerful. Right? I spoke in front of 2,800 young people in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh a couple months ago. And they're connecting with kids in Canada, in the UK, in Sri Lanka. Finally, this generation wants to make a difference. So I'm a Gen Xer. Any other Gen Xers in here? Thank you. Few. So 12% of us wanted to change the world with our jobs or vocations as we were coming of age. Millennials, any millennials here? You're also tiny. 39% of millennials want to change the world as they were coming of age. For this group, 60%. 60% of young people want to make the world a better place with their lives. Anyone want to guess what their number one issue? Given a choice of any topic that they wanted to cover. Food? Violence? Climate change, environment? Literally, world peace and tolerance. We are raising the most multicultural, most connected, most committed, most entrepreneurial group of human beings that have ever been produced in the history of the human race, and the problem is we are not calling them. If you're a 15-year-old right now, here in this town, and you're being bullied in your high school, you're worried about the political discourse of your country, you're watching bodies taken out of high schools in Florida or washing up from the shores because of the civil war in Syria, where do you go in that moment? I mean, really, where do you go? I mean, you might talk to your parents, but developmentally, that's not your go-to source of information. Maybe you belong to a school-based program or a faith-based program, but let's be honest, if you're angry at the world at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, you don't want to wait 3 months for your bar mitzvah program or your key club to get started, right? You want to be able to act in that moment. So let me tell you what we are building. Has anyone here been in a Home Depot? Just show of hands. least out with a credit card, because I like to come back with a toy. Because you never know. You know that sense when you walk into Home Depot, like anything is possible. I could build a shed, I could paint a wall, I could plant a garden. Right? What we have built is basically a digital Home Depot for social justice. Anything young people 13 to 25 want to do, create, build, we want to help them do it. So it is a digital community that lives wherever young people are. So it's a website that also lives on social media platforms. And young people in that moment of obligation have a community they can join. So right now we have young people from 127 countries who are part of this community. Some young people want to join other young people's projects. They want to see what other cool things are going on. They want to be part of that. So we have built, literally the world's largest marketplace of youth-led, youth-created social innovations. And then some young people want to start their own. Anyone ever do a science fair project? I grew parsley in my closet as a 6th grader. Parsley, yes. What did that prepare me for? And I did not become a great scientist, but I learned how to be a scientist. I learned about the scientific method, I learned how to ask and answer hypothesis, I learned how to present my data. We don't teach the skills of social change in the same way. We don't help young people learn how to do good. We just assume they'll pick it up. And let's be honest, we're not always great moms. So what we run are basically science fairs for social innovation. We take young people step by step on how to change the world. First, helping them choose what they care about. Right? It's almost like a Tinder for injustices. Like, do you want to save pandas or do you want to help with literacy? Like, what are the things you care about? Because someone asks young people, like, what do you care about? Some young people know, some young people have no idea. So help young people get clear about what it is they care about. And again, they do these in groups. It's all collaborative. Some of them are through schools, scouts, churches, some just find us. Then we help them research the issue rooted in compassion. So they need to interview people who are affected by the problem they want to fix. And they have to interview people who are causing the problem. And understand what keeps them up at night. Right? And it's got to be a real injustice. So we try to help young people understand the difference between an injustice and an inconvenience. My daughter's school has a dress code that she does not like. I explained to her, sweetie, that is an inconvenience. And what she says to me is, well, Dad, the school dress code only applies to girls and not to boys. That's an injustice. And from that, they created an insight. Like Wee's insight that it was a school culture that was the source of violence. Or Jessica, these small moments of compassion. Or Jeremiah, the power of compliments. And then we help them create a project, soup to nuts. What's your goal? What are your activities? What's your budget? What do you need to be successful? Who's on your team? What does success look like? Step by step. Anything and everything they need. And they get to choose what tools they use. Young people control everything. And then any team of young people needs it gets a digital mentor. Some young people have in their community, some people don't. Some young people don't need it. And what's cool is they get to choose their mentor. Right, so everyone in this room can sign up to mentor a team of young people tonight. And maybe they're here, maybe they're in Sri Lanka. And really your job is just to love on these young people. Give them support and care in their journeys. But the real important thing we do is we give young people money. So any team of young people who needs it gets up to $250 to get the project started. I know that may not sound like a ton of money, but that is a barrier. If you can't afford poster board, or pizza for a volunteer gathering, or supplies, you stop. We try to give it to young people in 48 hours, And guess what? They don't have to keep receipts. Right? Our whole message to young people is we trust you. You've got this. I cannot tell you how revolutionary that is. Isn't this being taped? Maybe I should tell the story. I won't mention names. There was a foundation out there, a great foundation that does great work supporting young people. And I was sitting down with the head of the foundation. They'd given us some money. I was talking about what we do and the mini grants we give to young people. And she pauses me and she goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, young person applies and they do all this work of research and they say, here's our budget, and do some back and forth, and then we give them money." And she goes, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, it could be PayPal, it could be a check, it could be gift cards, cash, however they need it, we'll get it to them. It could go to an adult if they don't have a checking account, but young people are in control of it." "What do you mean?" So finally I'm like, "What do you mean, what do I mean?" And she said, "You cannot give money directly to young people." And I said, "Why not?" "Well, how do you know they're going to use it responsibly? They could be buying comic books or drugs." I'm like, "Really? Your biggest concern is some group of young people in Sterling, Massachusetts are going to spend 3 months researching a social injustice, create a budget and a plan of action to cheat us out of $180. That's what we can be guarding against." But we do that. I mean, we do that to our young people. Wait, why do you want to do that? Where are you going? But the best part is young people have this community of other young people they get to collaborate with. Anyone here a gamer? You like video games? We're like, come on, be proud. Thank you. So Abby's a young woman in Pennsylvania who's a gamer. She loves online games. And the online gaming world is a horrible place for girls and women. It's misogynistic, it's also homophobic, it's got a lot of issues. Badly bullied in the gaming world. So badly bullied that she dropped out of high school. And she decided that what she wanted to do was to build an online gaming community that was pro-female but open to everyone. And she wanted to figure out how to partner with the university. She's not been in college, so she put it out in our community, and a swarm of young people came around her and said, "Here's how I partner with the university. Let me connect you to my computer science professor. We're holding a hackathon in 3 weeks. Come join us." Right? That's the power of that community. That collective resources and also young people feeling like they're not alone. Then young people implement their projects, and then they evaluate. We train young people to be evaluators of their own impact. And then we help them package their stories. Now for some young people, for most of the young people, that's it, right? It's like me growing parsley in my closet, like I did my science forever, and then I moved on to something else. Some young people want to keep going. And so for those young people, we offer accelerators, boot camps, if you will, where those teams of young people get to come into a community like this and work with mentors to help them take their projects to the next level. In person, deep coaching, and then they pitch their ideas to an audience. And then usually we give them $1,000, $2,000 in 6 months of intensive mentoring, right, to help them scale and grow their work. The other thing that we've built is what I believe is the world's largest database of stories about young people leading change. I want to share 2 statistics with you that should terrify you. One comes from Gallup that asks a question of adults here in the United States about their impressions of young people in your community. Open-ended. How would you describe young people in your community? Ready for this? Top 3 words. In order. lazy, dangerous, and apathetic. I don't care. 71% of adults in the United States have a negative image of young people. Berkeley Media Studies Group did a study of all media stories about young people over a 12-month period. Anyone want to guess what percentage of those news stories were positive stories? 10%? 1% of news stories about young people were positive. So what we were trying to do is put a different narrative out there and different storytellers. Right? So we're supporting young people to be in places and positions of power as authorities. Not just about what it's like to be young, but what it's like to create change. Right? So imagine the CNN panel about immigration, and instead of having 5 people who look like me, having Cloudy up there, a 16-year-old in South Florida who's helping young people get access to DACA, which they have a right to do. Right? Or conversations about our country after Ferguson, and having people who look like me on that panel, but having Babatunde be part of that conversation. Putting young people in places where their stories can be heard. Putting young people on boards. Do you have young people on your board here?
Some of our leadership teams, yeah. Not on the big board, but on the leadership teams.
And I'm not here to judge. It's hard because what we expect is young people to change their behavior to fit into what adults need them to do, rather than adults thinking about what are we willing to give up. Right? So we ask young people to be in advisory boards, to give their input, but we don't often let young people be in positions of power where they're controlling money. And so what we're trying to do is help with young people in those positions. I'm heading to the Middle East. We just got a grant from the Gates Foundation to do what I believe will be the first Middle East Youth Social Innovation Challenge. And I'm going to the World Government Summit, which is a huge gathering of 4,000 world leaders, and I'm bringing 3 young people with me. Not just as participants, but to be part of the leadership group that's happening there. So being able to have those stories to help change the narrative about how young people are seen. So I want to share one other piece of work and then open up for questions. Are folks with me so far? You getting bored? You okay? No. If you're head nodding. New Englanders are so reserved. So we studied culture change as a driver of impact. So if you can imagine this triangle of how we change the world, we've got direct service, how do we feed, clothe, teach people. We've got policy work, how do we use the levers of government and large-scale philanthropy to make the world a better place. This third lever is around culture change, which is about how do we change hearts and minds. I lost one of my students to gun violence a number of years ago, and at his funeral, the principal was leading a group of students to the gravesite, and they were walking in the opposite direction. And she went to call them over, and they turned back to her and said, "We want to go visit our other friends first." Right? The sense that we've got young people in our community who've got multiple friends to visit in cemeteries because of gun violence. Or I think about my son falling on recess when he was in kindergarten and having a teacher tell him to stop crying because he needed to be a man. 5.
A man at 5.
Or when people tell my daughters that they're beautiful but never smart. Right? We've got a culture. We've got a culture of violence. We've got a culture of intolerance. We have a culture of sexism. And yet we get better as people. So my wife's family is from Jamaica. 50 years ago, there were places in the United States we could not have gotten married. That's changed. 20 years ago, there were places we would not have held hands in the city of Dawson. That's changed. I wanted to understand how that change happened. So we spent a year with Deloitte studying movements that have built new cultural norms over the past 120 years. So from the workers' rights movement all the way up to the Arab Spring. And we wanted to understand what they had in common. Fascinating piece of research. I will boil it down for you in 30 seconds. First of all, that kind of change requires internal work as well as external work. So the work you all do here, for those of you who are members of this congregation, that's internal work. Right? That's working on your beliefs, not just your behaviors. Who are we as a beloved community? The second is that to create culture, to change culture, requires 3 ingredients. Stories are incredibly important. Right? Think about the Bible. Narratives about what's possible. Leaders who embody those stories, and a group that's ready to act behind it. Doesn't have to be very big, just 1 or 2% that's ready to act behind it. But the most exciting thing we found, and this was across every case study, 120 years of movements, one thing in common. They were all powered by young people. Just think about that. Young people are our most powerful creators of culture. Music, fashion, values. We all will live in the world that young people are building and creating for us right now. And what we realized was nobody was supporting young people in that work. So it's not about how do you find and support 100,000 really cool, innovative projects that young people are doing, but how do you begin to ladder those up around larger campaigns? Some of you may remember we had an election in 2016, presidential election, and we're around for that. Some people. People had feelings about that election. I know no one here did, but outside this beloved, peaceful community, people had feelings about that election. And so we launched a campaign shortly after, kind of tongue-in-cheek, we called it Make America Kind Again. And the idea was to invite young people across the United States to find places of disconnection and build community. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, we got young people from 40 states, half from Trump counties, half from Clinton counties, to work together to find common ground to build a beloved community. We did a campaign in Chicago around gun violence, helping young people take the most violent time in their city and make it the most peaceful. We went on tour with Lady Gaga, so everywhere I didn't. The cool people, my staff went. Where she performed, we did kindness challenges, campaigns, to get the best ideas in every community about what kindness looks like. We're working on education, so we just launched a campaign called Reimagine Learning. Any educators in here? It feels like I'm so tired. Most education work, it's charters, it's unions, are ultimately around adult needs, right? It's conversations about adults. And the question was, what would it look like to invite young people to build more equitable schools? To have young people identify a place of disconnection and design and build something. And then what if we source those hundreds of thousands of ideas and share them globally? Women's empowerment. Almost all the global women's empowerment work, girls' empowerment work, is done by adults. What would it look like to help young people, girls and boys, combat sexism in their own creative way? We were designing a project with exploring a project with the Vatican in Europe called Welcome in Europe, which is helping young people figure out how to welcome the stranger into their community. And just this month, we rolled out a partnership globally with the Red Cross, where we are their global youth innovation partner. 190 countries, helping to reimagine what it means to be a Red Cross volunteer. Not just about giving blood, which is great, or learning first aid, which is great, but being an innovator in your local community. What I'm most excited about is the promise of what it looks like when we begin to ladder up all these cool projects to create a much larger force for good. Where it's not just individual acts of young people, but the building up of movements of young people who will move that needle toward justice. So I want to say one final word and then open up for questions. Anyway, so that's the work of Peace First. PeaceFirst.org. It's all there. It's free. My book, which is somewhere. Yeah, absolutely. So they're $10. Signed copies are $8,000. Just kidding. So I want to go back to why I wrote this book. So I wrote it as a love letter to my 14-year-old self. So it is a book written to young people ages 10 and up. And it's a manifesto on how to be a good person. It's based around a set of commitments, all the ones I was talking about: compassion, courage, collaborative leadership. And each one is told through the story of a young person and their journey, with exercises that you can do. And the second half is a how-to guide. It's how to put together your own project. I always wanted to be a hand model. You can't tell because I'm so far away, but I have very attractive hands. My feet are another story, but my hands are incredibly attractive. And God's going to smite me. So the other thing, so I've interviewed about 10,000 young people. And one of the things I asked them is, what is the role that adults play in your life and in your work? And every single one talked about that adult. A parent, a grandparent, a guidance counselor who took them seriously. That's the language they use, who took them seriously. Sometimes they got out of the way. Sometimes they did nothing. If you remember nothing else from what we talk about, remember this. The 4 most important words you can say to a young person who wants to change the world. The most important thing you can ask them is, how can I help? How can I help? First of all, you're offering resources, right? You say, I want to be on your team. But where does the power lie in that question? With the young person. You're not saying, here, let me help you. Or here's how I would do it. Or back when I was a kid, this is what we did. But you're saying with those 4 simple words, how can I help? I got your back. I believe in you. I want to be on your team. Even when you're sitting there saying, please help me, Jesus. I don't know if I can do this one. You know what I'm talking about. Those words matter. So many young people I talked to were discouraged. You're too young. You're never going to figure that out. It's too hard. What if no one shows up? Right? Those are the words that we give to young people out of our own fear, which then, of course, places that fear on them. How can I help? So we have a few minutes for questions. Yeah. Thank you. I just like the waves.
I know. Okay.
So I'm curious what you want to know about, comments you want to add to the space, things you disagreed with, or like, I don't think that's how the world works. What do you want to know more about?
I just have a quick question in regards to the majority of the young people that have no one to go to, no one that's given them the confidence, like it seems like there's this huge amount of people. Do those people reach out to you too, or is usually most of them have some sort of backing to come to you? Does that make sense? And how do you find people that don't have anything?
So I would say, broadly speaking, it's probably 50-50 in terms of young people come to us with either a clear project or a clear sense of what they want to do, and those who come to us because they're feeling more lost or worried or scared. So we recruit young people through 3 avenues. So one is what we call our ground games. We have a network of 5,000 on the ground games. So big ones like the Vatican and the Catholic Church, and then small ones like individual congregations, schools, and then our air game, celebrities, musicians, athletes. So connecting where young people's passions are. So I've been doing this for a long time, and it's interesting. Things happen so differently than they did when I got started. Right? So when I was getting started, it was college students traveling to schools to teach conflict resolution and civic engagement. And we had binders that we opened up and read from. 76% of teenagers have smartphones. They carry the binders with them. Literally, it's all that knowledge is there. So we do a ton with influencers, social media. We find a lot of young people that way. And then for other young people. So we identify those culture creators, those cool kids who help mobilize and bring young people into the platform.
Have you had any backlash from the Saudi people that come with the kids that you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Part of the funding that we're getting is connected to the Saudi government, which leads to all sorts of interesting questions about who we're willing to work with and how we're willing to work with people. For better, and some people here may say for worse, our general philosophy is we don't say you can't play. We'd much rather be working with people than not working with people. No one's hands are clean. And I mean ours. What's interesting is how do we support youth innovation in wildly different cultural contexts. So we have some young people who are organizing around LGBTQ rights in the Middle East, for which their lives will be the same. So all the projects on our website, young people have the opportunity to make them private for their own safety. We spend a lot of time talking to young people about risks. What are safe risks, what are healthy risks. And I have to say, some of my favorite projects are coming from places that are culturally and politically repressive. So I spoke at this amazing conference to about 2,700 mostly Saudi young men and women. And I would say I had 250 of them find me in the hallway with their ideas. 95% of them were young women. Almost all of them were veiled. If any of you here are feeling pessimistic about the world, spend an afternoon talking to 12 Saudi young women and how they are creating a brand new world. It's not going to look like the US, for so many different reasons. But the change is really powerful, and it's coming. I mean, 2/3 of the Middle East are young people. And unemployment is huge. Young people are going to find ways to make their mark. It's either going to be in ways that lift the world up or tear it down. And it just depends on what resources and models are given. And that's global. That's just not just about the Middle East.
I was wondering whether if a young person sort of didn't have a vision for whether going to the website would be a place to get inspired to both make connections and maybe find a goal or a focus in life? Is that the best path, or would like a book or?
Should be a person in mind, like, no, I'm just kidding. So, if you buy my book for a young person, I guarantee you they will get to Harvard and will change you. Aside probably $30,000. No, I appreciate the question. So part of what we want to do with the site is inspire adults, but inspire young people to get started. One thing I'm finding, and this is a very broad brushstroke, but what I'm finding is kids who've got more privilege and resources actually know how to get stuff done, but actually don't know what they care about and don't know where they want to focus. And kids without privilege and resources are really clear about how the change they want to create, but no idea about how to get started. And our website's really built to help both ends of that spectrum. And the cool thing is you can join other young people's projects. You can say, I love what Jessica did, I want to do that in my community. It's radically open source. The idea is not to privilege innovation or to privilege scale. One of my all-time favorite projects was a 13-year-old in New York City with two of her friends. And they would go into the lunchroom every day and they would scan the lunchroom and they'd find that one kid that no one was sitting with and would go and sit with that kid every day. We can all do that. We all have the lunchrooms that we move in, and we can all draw the circle bigger. She doesn't need $10,000 to scale that project. She needs to be on Helen, but that's another.
So I have a question concerning the first year 3 C's you talked about, compassion. Yeah. In a world where so many decisions, injustices, inequalities derive from sources without a human face, from algorithms, from policies and procedures, from who gets a home loan, where is insurance extended, who's up for parole this month, how do we apply compassion to sources of injustice that we can hardly even begin to identify, let alone assign an individual action or identity to?
Do you mind if I ask you a personal question, which you can feel free not to answer?
Shoot.
How old are you?
24.
Okay, so first of all, come join us. This is why young people hate me. You've got to figure that out. And I think what we forget is the power that we have. As consumers, 1.6 billion young people is a huge, powerful block. Facebook right now is terrifying because the minute my Aunt Iris joined Facebook, my kids were not going to. And they love her. She's a delightful, terrific human being. But that's just not their community. My kids will never have Facebook accounts. Young people have a tremendous amount of power. And so the question is, not how do we change those systems that are being run in inhumane, inhuman ways, but what are you going to do about it? And then my question too is, how do I help you? And how do we connect with other young people who are building, creating new models? There are new lending models that are being created, where communities are pooling their money, where churches who have endowments that they just sit on are using those resources to do community lending. There's a tremendous amount of power in this room. There's a tremendous amount of power young people have. We just don't see it. Albie Sachs, who was a Supreme Court Justice in South Africa, wrote about the ending of apartheid, that all social change is impossible until it happens, and then it was inevitable. Right? I think about the ways in which things that we never thought we would see, we then see. And we're like, of course we like to be Black president. I can guarantee you that my wife's parents never thought that would happen. My parents never thought that would happen. And no matter what you think about President Obama, that is an accomplishment as a country with the history of racism and the present and future of racism that we hold. So you have to figure this out. That's your homework. Deal?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for coming out. I work at Leominster High School with students, and one of the things that has happened this year is that they've required even kids who are participating in GIVE, which is like a community service program, to pay a $75 fee, right? So even if you're part of even the National Honor Society, it's like the pay-to-play thing. It's like, so it's like a 50-50 kind of school where there's the haves that can afford that, and then there's the have-nots who can't really come up with $75 to join the LGBT group, you know, after school. And so your platform that you're talking about really resonates with me, because kids, you know, can't even get a ride home after school. That ability to connect with people online is pretty amazing. But I'm also just thinking about worry about this generation of kids who maybe will not have this opportunity to come together even like in a group of people like this and sit face to face. And that kind of freaks me out too, that it's like this whole kind of like we're going to isolate ourselves and be kind of on our own, but also connect online. What do you feel about that, kind of grappling with that? Like, there's a part of me that just kind of rejects that, like, kind of isolation and being okay with that in this generation of kids, because I can see that it's not so good, but then okay.
So I'm of two thoughts that are inconsistent with each other. So one is people have been wringing their hands about new technology since the wheel came out. They're like, I like the old square better. Like there's just a way that each new innovation creates anxiety about the change. And so as I watch young people using these tools in some really powerful ways, I'm inspired and moved by them. That's my first thought. The second is I am really worried about isolation. And actually not just for young people. I experience us as adults who are raising and taking care of young people really ambivalent about children and creating confusion. In the sense we both want our young people to, and demand that they grow up much faster than I did in terms of access to information, and also want to keep them younger. And the young people I talk to are really confused by those messages. And I think we're trying to settle in, all of us, into a world that's increasingly bifurcated, confusing, worried. And I think that only gets solved in community. I mean, physically. I think that only gets fixed by seeing people and watching them smile and doing the hard work which church communities do. I mean, church communities are hard places. Schools are hard places. Workplaces are hard places. Because there's just stuff you can't unfriend your minister. You know, or another convert, like they're just going to keep showing up, you know. And so I remain hopeful about new ways of communities being built, and worried that we are losing our ability to be part of community.
Hi, thanks so much for coming out. My name's Bob. I'm wondering, just because this is a real area of interest of mine, how you've seen your young people who are activists translate their passions in their youth into careers of meaning and purpose. And does your organization support that in any way or help that mentorship? Most of what we've talked about is, you know, young people finding, you know, purpose, passion, activism, and so forth in their youth, making change. At some point in time, they're going to transition as they emerge into adults. to need careers that will sustain them and help them thrive. And I see so much potential and opportunity for them to create meaningful careers from this passion and activism that you're inspiring at the younger ages.
It's a great question. I've got two thoughts that I'll share. One is, so we have these prizes that we give out, we have a fellowship. So we're supporting this generation's Gandhis, Dr. Kings, Ella Bakers. And it's interesting, so there are young people like Jessica who start their work so young. And then they want to do something different and they feel like they can't. They kind of get trapped in this sense of like, okay, I'm a teddy bear girl, so I have to keep this organization going.
Is that like you, Eric?
And it almost becomes like being a childhood actor. It kind of becomes a shtick and becomes who they are. So we push really hard against that. So we tell young people is, if you want to be an ophthalmologist, be an ophthalmologist, but be a peacemaker while you do it.
Yeah.
So I'm much less interested in young people's projects than more that sense of purpose and connection, commitment that it helps them build. Because there's a shadow side to this work, which is this sense of anxiety about am I doing enough?
Yeah.
And we're all, I mean, let's be honest, like, that's how we move through our days. Like, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? It's funny, I've not applied for a job since Burger King when I was 14. And, yet people come to me looking for advice on careers. My Apple stock 20 years ago. I had a young man who was in my office. He just graduated from Harvard Law School. He just got married, and I had three amazing options in front of him: a fellowship, the ability to go to South Africa, I believe, to help them build their justice system, clerkship, very prestigious clerkship. And he was crying because he was so overwrought by these possibilities. He said, "Eric, tell me which of these options is going to create the greatest good. Like, which of these paths is going to create the greatest good in the world?" Those kind of questions you'd ask me at Western. And I remember thinking about it and looking at it, I was like, dude, just be a good husband, right? Nail that. Give up your seat to someone on the T who looks like they're having a hard day. Our lives are the accumulation of our daily acts. And real social justice, real change is lived every day. By where we live, where we send our kids to school, how we treat our neighbors, voting. And I think we tend to conflate these kind of big moments that change the world, and we forget this sort of slog of justice work. The number of people for whom I really matter, and this isn't false humility, but really matter, I could probably count on one hand, maybe two. And that's probably true for most of us. Those are the relationships that we've got to get right. And so my message to young people is, I don't care what you do, I mean I do, but really I care who you are and how you move through the world. It's like, they're amazing teachers, and their teachers do a tremendous amount of damage to young people. They're both in good professions, right? They're both in helping professions. But how they do that, how they embody that makes a difference. And we all know that person we interact with in whatever it is, our coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, the librarian, who's just a gift from God, is just a ray of sunshine. He changes the space around them. And so I think with young people, it's helping them find the things that they're passionate about, but understand that that will grow and change as they grow and change. My message to young people, and I'm really clear about this in my book, is who you are is more important than what you do. But you have to do something. You can't sit on the sidelines.
Eric, this young woman has a question, but I just wanted to say, to follow up to that. So Eric and I worked together 10 years ago? It was like a decade ago. I wanted to tell you that I think about something that Eric said during our time together almost every day of my life, which it has nothing to do with Peace First or youth empowerment or all, or the many beautiful sermons I heard him preach. He told me once that he and his wife, I don't even know if they still do this, but they promised each other that year that they would not ask something of the other one unless they really deeply needed that thing to happen. And that it was, I'm not articulating this beautifully, but I'm telling you this because I think about it all the time. I'm divorced and remarried. Last time he knew me, I was with a different man. and every day I think about how can I be a good spouse? How can I not ask? How can I only ask for what I need of my spouse? And I'm telling you this, Eric, because the thing that you taught me that I've always remembered is about being a good person and being a good spouse. It's not about sort of changing the world. It's about changing relationship. And so I just want to say that I really appreciate that way that you walk the walk actually in your personal relationship and how that is number one, your kids too.
Thank you. And what I'll just add is I think by being a good spouse, you are changing the world. That's how it happens.
Amen. Yeah.
What happened to that, where did they go to South Africa? What happened to that?
Buy the book. I'm going to take this last question because I want to make sure I've got time to sign books.
All right, I think I forgot what I was going to say after she called me a young lady, so. Okay, well, thank you, Eric. Wear a few hats, but I teach at Worcester State, and I'm on the verge of scrapping the packet that we're on the eve of printing the packet, and I think you won't do that, especially given how students get information, and perhaps let's talk about the book going widespread in the urban studies course starting a week. I guess two questions. One is, so you have a lot of these young people that have great ideas and projects, and a lot of those young people could naturally help one another fulfilling their projects. I'm wondering if you have any sort of like a talent or skill or interest type bank or inventory where they can search and find each other to help each other fulfill on those projects. So that's the first.
So the answer is no. It's a great idea. Our community connection work is mediocre, and we're trying to figure out how to do that better.
Cool. And then I think the acronym is MAKEA, Make America Kind Again. Curious what happened with that initiative, and more importantly, how do you see that influencing 2020?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and the politics is one of those things that I experienced creating that knot in your stomach. Because you either feel strongly about things, you don't feel strongly about things, you disagree with one another. And again, there are no disagreements in this community, I'm talking about those other communities. And they're real. I mean, they're real things at stake, they're real lives, they're real questions. We have to spend a lot more time leaning into curiosity and less time leaning into judgment. We need to spend more time understanding I was outside of a principal's office in the elementary school, and there was a fourth grader who just got into a fight. And he was doing that thing that fourth graders do when they're crying, but they don't want you to know they're crying. You notice that by like, and so I asked him what happened, and he goes, "It wasn't my fault." I said, "Just curious, what happened?" And he shared a story about being out on recess and another boy insulted his mother, and so we hit him. And I remember he was telling stories, like getting riled up, and I remember saying to him, you know, if someone had insulted my mother, I'd want to hit them too. I wouldn't, because I think it's actually wrong to hurt another person. But I can understand why you were so angry that you wanted to do that. That was all he needed. He knew he should not have smacked that other kid. He knew he was wrong for doing that. But he needed an adult to say, I understand how you feel. I do not agree with what you did. I think what you did is wrong. I think what you did is a girl. I think it was a bad thing to do. But I understand why you did it. And what happens is we conflate understanding with condoning. And so part of what I loved about our post-election project was forcing young people to do understanding work, to do that research, to lean into that curiosity. Again, Babatunde didn't leave his project. This wasn't sort of that Babatunde became a police officer, right? That's not how the story ended. And if you were here, he would not condone a lot of the activities that the police are doing in his community. But he understands why it's happening. He understands the humanity behind that. And what I'm really interested in doing, so we are, first of all, the platform is evergreen, it's always on. You know, people can start whenever and however they want. I want to do another compassion-based campaign leading up to 2020. We're working with the families of Dr. King and Gandhi and Nelson Mandela to see about doing something that's grounded in peacemaking and compassion. I don't know where that will go. But we have a number of cool projects that are going on. So right now, any young person who has a project is eligible to go to an accelerator in Geneva as part of the Red Cross's 100th birthday to pitch their ideas from the stage. So anyway, we have some cool incentive projects that folks are working on. But the thing I'm most excited about right now is I want to raise a fund, a youth investment fund, a $10 million fund that will just invest in young people's ideas to change the world. I was at the UN at a youth conference. There's a young woman, Victoria from Lagos, from Nigeria, who's doing some really interesting work around infant mortality and the shame for women who lose their children. And I said, that's amazing, you should join our platform, I'd love to give you money to do that. And she goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, you can apply for a grant and we'll give you money. And she goes, what do you mean? She could not believe that we would give money to her and not an NGO. And what happens is a lot of those NGOs take a slice of it. I was like, oh, we'll just give you the money. And she's like, well, what do I need to do? And I was like, do something good with it. So think about a world where we put $10 million worth of capital into the hands of young people in small $250 chunks around the world to do good with it. If I'm successful in doing this, if we're successful in doing this, this will be the single largest transference of wealth into the hands of young people to do social justice work in the history of our country. So if anyone has laying around, I will help you put it to use.
Do we get that in book in like a moment?
You get 3.
10 million plus 8,000. So can we all thank Eric for coming here